For years, people talked quietly about Johnny Carson, the most famous late-night TV guy. They wondered what secrets he kept hidden from the cameras. But when people finally opened his private garage, they found something amazing. Hidden treasures, stories never told, and shocking things. This was Johnny Carson like the world had never seen him before. On January 23, 2005, the world lost someone it had trusted for 30 years. Johnny Carson, the famous host of The Tonight Show, died at age 79 from a lung sickness called emphysema. In his last days, he fought a quiet fight with the sickness in his lungs. People who knew him said he looked weak, but he still had that funny, dry sense of humor that made millions of people laugh. His health had been getting worse for years. But when he died, the news still shocked everyone. The man who was called the king of late night was gone. TV networks showed one tribute after another. Headlines talked about losing a huge part of American culture. Friends and people he used to work with talked with sad voices, remembering how funny he was, his perfect timing, and how he could connect with regular people from behind a desk. But as people felt sad, they also started talking. Carson had kept his life very private, even from the people closest to him. Soon after he died, people started saying his home still had secrets. Maybe there were boxes nobody had ever seen. Maybe there were locked rooms no one had been in. Maybe there were even letters that could change how people remembered him. A writer named Bill Z once said, "Johnny Carson was a mystery. He gave everything when he was on stage, but nothing when the cameras turned off." That mystery made fans and news reporters really want to know what might come out now that he was gone. If Carson had hidden his deepest thoughts while he was alive, maybe all his stuff would tell his real story. Soon, people who worked for his family started going through everything he owned. It was a huge job. Carson had lived surrounded by fancy things and memories. Every room had signs of his life, awards on shelves, old photos of young Johnny smiling with guests, and objects that hinted at stories nobody knew about. The workers moved carefully from room to room, opening cabinets and marking boxes. But even though the whole house had history in it, they kept coming back to one place that got the most attention, his garage. But when they walked through the front doors of his big house, they had no idea the real secret was behind the garage door. In 1984, Johnny Carson made a choice that showed what he was really like inside, as much as his quiet nature ever did. He bought an amazing house on the cliffs of Point Dume in Malibu, California. He paid $9.5 million for it, a huge amount of money back then. But for Carson, it was more than just property. It was his hiding place, a safe spot where he could get away from all the people watching him every day for 30 years on The Tonight Show. The land spread across 4 acres and looked out at the blue Pacific Ocean and Little Dume Beach below. To walk around those grounds felt like the ocean was part of the house itself. Gardens had pretty colors, fish ponds shined, and there was even a birdhouse full of exotic birds. There were fruit trees, areas with seats on them, and in the middle of everything, the main house, a 7,000 square foot amazing building made by an architect. The big house was designed by an architect named Ed Niles, who loved using glass and would to make the walls between inside and outside disappear. Johnny's home felt less like a regular house and more like a work of art. Huge glass windows opened up to the ocean and a 30-foot high glass ceiling curved above an indoor garden where real trees grew, reaching their branches toward the light. Inside, life happened on 3 different levels. The top floor was Johnny's private area, a bedroom with big ocean views, huge closets, and 2 offices where he could think by himself. The middle levels were made for feeling good and impressing people. There was a really big kitchen, a wine room, outdoor areas that blended inside and outside together, and a room where Johnny could watch other people perform instead of doing the performing himself. The property also had a saltwater pool, a hot tub, a tennis court, and a covered building that people said was a gift from the NBC TV network. There were parking spots and a garage big enough to fit dozens of cars. Each space made you wonder what secrets might be locked away inside them. But even though there was all this glass and high ceilings making things feel open, Johnny himself was not very open. He was warm and funny in front of an audience, but quiet and distant in private. Not many people got to go past those glass doors. People who did go inside often said that even in his own home, Johnny still seemed mysterious. When the workers began to list everything he owned after he died, they found more than just awards and photographs. Boxes that said miscellaneous were lined up in back rooms, some locked up tight. Cabinets were sealed shut with keys missing. Some storage areas were marked "Do not go in here," even for people who had worked for him a long time. At one point, an assistant got nervous before turning the handle of a locked door because they weren't sure what was inside. They didn't know yet that just past the garage wall, another door was waiting, and behind that, a bunch of mysteries. The garage door rolled up, its metal pieces making noise as a beam of light poured across the shiny chrome. Dust floated in the air, the kind that only builds up when a room has been closed for a really long time. What was inside wasn't just a bunch of cars. It was like a time machine, a secret museum of Johnny Carson's private life. Parked neatly in rows were cars that told his story better than any interview ever could. At the far end sat a 1939 Chrysler Royal, old and faded, but shining with memories. This was the car that belonged to his dad. This was the very car where Carson learned to drive. The Chrysler wasn't about speed or looking fancy. It was about where he came from. Years later, he left it in his will to Jay Leno, like he was passing something important from one late night star to another. Then there was the shiny silver star of the collection, a 1981 DeLorean DMC-12. With its doors that opened up like wings and its look from the future, it seemed like something frozen in time. Carson wasn't just a fan of this car. He had put $500,000 into the company that made it. The car had once gotten stuck with him inside when the electrical system broke, and he had to pound on the glass to get out. He used to tell this story as a funny joke. But here, in the quiet darkness of his garage, the DeLorean felt like it meant something bigger. Doors that wouldn't open, secrets that wouldn't let go. Next to it was a fancy 1988 Mercedes-Benz 560 SL painted bright white with leather seats inside. Unlike the DeLorean, this car wasn't trying to be special. It was classy and simple, showing that Carson liked comfort and nice things. He kept it for more than 10 years, even after he got rid of other cars. Some people whispered that this car carried more than just memories. A person who parked cars for him once said there were important papers tucked in its glove compartment, things Carson never wanted to leave the house. There was also his 1992 Chevrolet Corvette, which showed what his later years were like. This was his last car, his final ride. Some people thought it meant the end of his searching for new adventures on the open road. Others wondered if he had left something personal inside it, maybe a diary or letters he never sent. And hidden in the back, a rare 1966 Ferrari 450 SS. Its Italian curves showed another side of Carson, one that liked unusual things. Rare finds hidden from people watching. But the cars were just part of the mystery. As the workers looked more closely, they saw weird things. Boxes that said miscellaneous were piled against the wall. Cabinets were locked with no keys anywhere to be found. There was a folder stuck oddly behind a tool rack. One person working there got nervous before prying the folder open. Inside was a single envelope that had turned yellow with age. The handwriting was easy to recognize. It was Johnny's handwriting. The name on the front was someone nobody knew. The room got very quiet. For years, people said Carson was cold and distant, even to people who were close to him. Now, here was proof that his private life still had stories nobody knew about. The envelope shook in their hands. They started to unfold the delicate paper inside. And in that moment, they understood that this might change everything people thought they knew about Johnny Carson. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the smiling face America watched every night. But when the cameras were off, his private world was harder to understand. His life was shaped not just by applause from millions of people, but by relationships he had trouble keeping together at home. Carson got married 4 times, and each marriage left its own mark. His first marriage was to Joan Jody Morrill Walcott in 1949, long before he was famous. Together they had 3 sons named Chris, Rick, and Corey. Their early years looked good, but Carson's fame grew bigger. He was gone a lot, and he drank too much, which hurt their marriage. By 1963, after 14 years of problems, they got divorced. Just a few months later, Carson married Joan Copeland. She joined his fancy world when his career was really big. For almost 10 years, she lived through the fun times and the hard times. But Joan later said that when he drank, he turned into a completely different person. By 1972, this marriage had ended too, leaving hurt and angry feelings behind. That same year, Carson got married again, this time to Joanna Holland. Their marriage lasted 13 years, longer than the others, but it was just as hard. When they got divorced in 1985, Holland told him on the night of their anniversary dinner. Carson didn't see it coming. It was one of the few times when the man who was always in control wasn't ready for something. His last marriage was to Alexis Moss in 1987. Unlike the others, this one lasted until he died in 2005. Friends said Alexis brought a calmer feeling into his later years, a kind of quiet friendship that gave him what he needed for privacy. But the real story of Carson's private life was about being a father. His 3 sons, Chris, Rick, and Corey, didn't see him much when they were kids. Carson himself said later that he wasn't the kind of dad he wanted to be. Rick, his middle son, had it the hardest. He had mental health problems and spent time in hospitals. Sadly, in 1991, Rick died in a car crash when he was 39 years old. You could see Carson was sad when he talked about Rick on his show. But people who knew him well wondered if his sadness was stronger because he felt guilty about all the years of distance. When the workers searched his garage, they found not just cars, but boxes full of letters. Some of them were drafts of notes he never sent. One looked like it was written to my boys. The handwriting was neat and careful, like Carson was practicing what he couldn't quite say out loud. One old envelope shocked the people looking through everything. Inside was a letter that seemed to be written to Rick. It talked about being sorry, wanting to have been there more, and hoping his son knew he loved him, even when they didn't talk. The words felt real and honest, very different from the smart jokes people remembered. For someone who hid behind charm and jokes, here were real feelings from a father's heart. These letters showed what the world never saw. Not the king of late night, but a person who dealt with love, sadness, and problems he had caused himself. But what they found next was so surprising. Even people super close to Carson didn't know about it until now. The man who made millions laugh every night carried pain inside him that almost nobody ever saw. Writers named Bill Zimi and Mike Thomas in their book about Carson describe a host who could be amazing on TV, but mean in private. Drinking was usually what started it. Friends and his past wives remembered how one drink could turn him into someone completely different. Joan Copeland, his second wife, once said he became 2 different people when he drank. The funny entertainer became tense, angry, even mean, saying things he would be sorry about later. His first marriage to Jody Walcott had lots of big fights. One writer tells stories about loud arguments with lots of drinking that happened in front of other people. After that came long periods of silence, days or weeks of cold distance, guilt, and hard feelings. Copeland had the same kinds of fights. She talked about nights where laughing would turn to anger with no warning. This two-sided nature made Carson's private life hard, creating rumors and whispers that lasted long after the camera stopped. The public got a small look at these problems in 1982 when Carson was arrested for drunk driving near Beverly Hills. The story spread across newspapers and shocked fans who thought of him as someone who could do no wrong. He said he was guilty, paid a fine, and had to be on probation. It became one of his few scandals that got reported everywhere. But writers who studied his life say that what happened behind closed doors in his marriages was much worse than what any newspaper could tell. Carson kept having the same pattern in each marriage. First came affection and glamour. Then jealousy, secrets, and emotional distance showed up. His wives struggled with a man who belonged to the public, but kept his real self hidden. His marriage to Joan Copeland was especially painful. There were rumors that she had a romantic relationship with a football star named Frank Gifford. Some people say Carson found out she rented an apartment for secret meetings. For someone who was already guarded and didn't trust people easily, this hurt really badly. His pain wasn't just at home, but also in his work. Carson's drive to be successful created rivalries. One famous fight was with Wayne Newton after a deal about a hotel in Vegas didn't work out. Carson made jokes about Newton on TV, jokes that Newton said were meant to hurt him. With Joan Rivers, it was a different kind of problem. She had been his guest host many times and his friend. When she started her own talk show, Carson felt like she had betrayed him. He never talked to her again, which made Rivers very sad. The silence between them lasted until he died, showing how unforgiving he could be when he thought someone wasn't loyal. Carson's silence was his protection. He almost never talked about his past, his politics, or his feelings. In a magazine interview, he once said, "I live my life, especially my personal life, just for me." It was his way of saying, the world can have the entertainer, but not the real person underneath. Writers who studied his life say this privacy went even further than anyone thought. Rooms in his home were locked, even from people who worked for him a long time. Some of his kids also had trouble with him. His son Rick had mental illness, but Carson supposedly didn't visit him in the hospital. This was another sign of the walls he built, even with his own family. The world loved Johnny Carson, but darkness in his life was never far from the laughter. And yet, people who were closest to him would soon find out that the darkest secrets weren't just in his marriages or fights. They were hidden in places nobody had thought to look. Johnny Carson's story didn't start with bright lights in Hollywood. He was born in Corning, Iowa in 1925 and grew up during really hard times called the Great Depression. He was a shy boy who liked doing magic tricks for his neighbors. After he served in the Navy during World War II, he got into radio. His calm voice and sharp wit made him stand out fast. By the 1950s, television was getting big, and Carson knew that TV was the future. He hosted a show called Who Do You Trust? Before getting the big chance that would make him famous, taking over The Tonight Show in 1962. For the next 30 years, Carson was the king of late night. He made America laugh at the end of every day, turning regular conversations into amazing entertainment. His timing was incredible. His jokes were sharp and clever, but not mean. He became known as the king of late night, and he wore that title well, even though it hid how hard he worked behind the scenes. He stopped working in 1992, and his goodbye show was watched by more than 50 million people. It showed how much he was part of what Americans loved. The awards Carson got were as many as the laughs he gave. He won 6 Emmy Awards, a Peabody Award, and a special award from the TV Academy. In 1993, the president gave him the Medal of Freedom.